Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome back to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon. Doing the job the American media maggots won't, fundamentally changing America, one diaper at a time. Here is, courtesy of the SHR Media Network, the Bloviating Zeppelin.
You're listening to Late Night Radio on the SHR Media Network. Caution, there will be mature themes explored and potentially adult language used. If conservatarian words, phrases, certain concepts, or rhetoric offends you, tune out now.
Uh-oh, guess what day it is? Guess what day it is? Huh? Anybody? Julie, hey, guess what day it is? Oh, come on, I know you can hear me. Mike. What day is it, Mike?
Oh, you magnificent bastard, I read your book.
I drink your milkshake.
How dare you?
I call that bold talk for a one-eyed fat man.
Fill your hand, you son of a bitch.
Of course you realize this means war.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. I think this is going to be one of the best shows that I've put on, if technologically I can pull it off. Because with me, that's always a challenge and a feat. Not hands, feet. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show. You got a belly up for the bar, we've kept your seat, and it's great to see you back. Snowball is going to be your bartender tonight. He pours with the best of them and the lava lamp is lighted, although you can't see it right now, and it's not because you're on visual probation. No. It's because my entire show is on visual probation. There isn't enough horsepower here to make video run. It's like a stegosaurus. A stegosaurus had, A stegosaurus had two brains, you may or may not know. He had a walnut-sized brain and a ganglion in his hips to make his legs move. That's me with regarding technology. But I gotta tell you this, we don't water our drinks just like we don't water our conversation. Politics, religion, crime, culture, race, sex, economics, science, law. We talk about it all right here at the Saloon. The speech is free, but the booze isn't, and nothing is sacred here. As I indicated, I have four great guests tonight. With luck, you read some of the social media, and I am honored to have these four people on tonight. I think it'll be great. So, for tonight, I have two pastors, and one of them ran for mayor of Baltimore. I have another gentleman who is actively running for Congress in Alaska, and another gentleman who runs an entire TV network. So tonight I have, for your listening pleasure, oh please, Lord, let me pull this off if I can, pretty please. I have Shannon Wright, pastor. I have Ralph Chittams, pastor. I have Randy Purham. And also I have Ken McCLENTON, who will be calling in a little bit later because he himself is wrapping up his own show right now. So just, Lord, if you would be kind to me tonight, please, when I ask for them to weigh in, please let them be here. Shannon, are you here?
I'd like to say no just to hear you sweat.
Okay, all right. Whew. Shannon's here. Randy Purham, are you here?
He's speaking no English.
Okay, all right, that works for me. And then going over to the other telephone, Ralph Chittams, are you here?
If the saloon is open, I'm at the bar.
Excellent. And finally, last but certainly not least, because he had to wrap up his own show, Ken McCLENTON, Sr., are you here?
Yes, if I'm at the bar, it's because I'm cleaning it.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. That can't be true. Ken?
That was easy.
Anyway, thank you all for being here tonight. And I wanted to do this.
Thank you.
I've actually wanted to do this show before, but I was confused how I would pull it off and what guests I would use. I want to introduce everybody here. What I'd like to do is, the goal of tonight is to discuss some basic fundamental questions about religion. That is to say, what is the state of religion today in the United States, and why does it matter? Why is that important right now? So with these four wonderful individuals who have their own shows, by the way, past or current, they're all radio hosts, and they are all very intelligent, motivated people with a hook into religion, and they know how to discuss almost any issue that you can think of, and I'm hoping tonight that we'll have a great roundtable with these various issues. That having been said, what I'd like to do is go around the room, if I could, the digital room, and very briefly have everybody here tell folks who you are. So, Shannon, if you're here, could you give a little bit of information about yourself, please?
So, how do I answer that one? I live in Baltimore. I'm a black woman. I'm a Republican, which means I am a unicorn or anomaly or whatever you call it.
Okay.
Other than that, I have one head, no tails, 2 arms and 2 legs, so we can dispel all those myths. I believe in basic core values. I think that's what built this country. I think that's what my Bible says, and I think that's what I'm going to work towards every day, no matter where I am.
Okay. And the other thing I don't know if this was purposeful or not, because I guess you'll be back. You ran for mayor of Baltimore because you were motivated sufficiently so that you wanted to get directly involved in politics. I find that an astounding, very courageous thing.
So I did run for mayor. I won the primary. It was an interesting race. The largest network here started off their, quote, campaign season with a breaking news story that over 51% of the mayoral candidates pre-primary, and there were about 14 or 15 of us, maybe more, over 51% of them had criminal records with multiple charges.
And
I'll just let that marinate on that for a minute.
And of course, you're not supposed to talk about things like that, are you?
So, I wouldn't ordinarily, except one of my opponents in the primary in my own party was a gentleman that tried to take out a restraining order on my husband, and we went through a criminal trial, and he served jail time during the election cycle.
Holy
and we
crap.
currently still have a no contact order for another 2 years.
Okay. All right. You were also a pastor at one time, or are you still?
I am, and as a matter of fact, we are starting up services again next month.
Okay, beautiful. One of the primary reasons that I wanted you to be here tonight. Also, I have Ralph Chittams in the show, a pastor himself. Ralph Chittams, can you tell people a little bit about yourself?
Certainly. Well, first, thanks for asking me to participate in this show. Again, my name is Ralph Chittams. I am an ordained Baptist minister. I actually live within the geographical boundaries of the District of Columbia. So I am officially a swamp dweller. I don't live in Maryland or Virginia. I live in the swamp. I too have forayed into elected politics. Back in 2008, I ran for a seat on the school board here in D.C., and then in 2018, I ran for a seat on the D.C. Council, one of their at-large positions. So one of my friends always tells me, I live right smack in the intersection of faith and public policy.
Physically, literally.
Literally.
And since we're talking about D.C., I am glad that this gentleman showed up. I know he had to wrap up his own radio show, which he did tonight. Ken McCLENTON, could you tell people, owner, by the way, and broadcaster of TECN, Ken McCLENTON, could you tell folks a little bit about yourself too, please? Pretty please, if you would, with sugar on top.
Oh, sure. I'm a recovering pastor and full-time minister of the Lord of Jesus Christ. And I actually am the president, founder and chairman of TECN TV, the host of the Exceptional Conservative Show. I'm honored to be having been considered for this particular public panel. The weight of my opinion lessens in comparison to these great individuals. I'm endeared with the fact that Randy Purham, a ordained minister as well, actually is one of the hosts on our television network. And so I'm ever so thankful, BZ, for you including me in this conversation about Christianity and the future of America.
Thank you, sir, Ken McCLENTON. And last but not least, certainly mentioned before, is Randy Purham, who I should submit is running for Alaska's congressional seat. Alaska has one congressional seat. I last spoke to Randy about 3 weeks ago for the full 2 hours about who he is, his background, and what he wants to do in Alaska. So, Randy, for the people that didn't hear that show, could you tell folks a little bit about yourself as well, please?
Yes, absolutely. Good evening, everyone. My name is Randy Purham, born and raised in Chicago, residing in Texas, resident of Alaska, and I do also live in Alaska, too, for those that are listening in Alaska, wondering why I'm in Texas. Long story short, I retired out of Italy, but they had to bring me back to Texas because they could not ship me back to Alaska. So here I am, and had to finish up my retirement process here. I am not a pastor. However, I do preach to the choir a lot and other people when I get a chance to about various things in life. And running as a congressional candidate for Alaska because I believe it's time to, reshape the face of politics for not only Alaska but also for the United States and get us back on track to get rid of this craziness that's going on. But outside of that, I also host the new Now Equipped with Wisdom with Randy Purham on Mondays and Fridays on TECNTV.com as well. And I look forward to the discussion tonight and having some fun. I'm gonna go in. I'm gonna go in on these other pastors here that say that they're gonna open up soon.
So thanks to everybody for being here tonight. Thanks to Shannon Wright. Thanks to Ralph Chittams. Thanks to Randy Purham, and thanks to Ken McCLENTON. I wanted to get this together, and I wanted to do a big roundtable because what I think that conservatives are facing now isn't a matter of Republican versus Democrat anymore, or conservative versus leftist. I believe it's a lot more fundamental than that. It's literally, in my opinion, good versus evil. And after having served 41 years in law enforcement, I have a pretty good idea what evil looks like. I know what evil smells like and how it moves. I know how it speaks, what it says, its inflection, its tone, its mannerisms, and I've seen it even down to its little facial tics. I know how it will lie to you, baldly, nakedly, no shame whatsoever, no concern, no introspection, self-awareness whatsoever, when the truth could save it, because it's totally unfamiliar with the truth or shame or self-examination. Evil shot at me 4 times as a law enforcement officer, and I've shot back once. Those situations were not the worst evil I ever encountered. I came across, here's an example, I came across evil in a 16-year-old who shot and killed a fellow student in a pizza restaurant robbery where he used to work. His statement to me when I was a homicide detective was, "You know, if the doctors had done a better job, he wouldn't have died." I also booked the thrill killer, a guy named Eric Royce Leonard, who'd shot and killed 6 people in 2 separate incidents, a short distance from each other, on consecutive Tuesdays, which is weird, 1 week apart in February of 1991. He had absolutely no affect whatsoever, and a fellow homicide detective and I, Stan Reed, took him to the Sacramento County Main Jail. I could go on. Okay, one more. I arrested a female who had shot and killed her spouse because they were divorcing, and they were arguing about who would get the batteries in the TV remote control. Well, she won. And when I arrived, she was cooking dinner on the stove because, quote, I was hungry and he didn't need to eat. I arrested any number of pedophiles while I worked in child abuse, involving cases with details the likes of which I'm not going to go into here, but I'm sure that if you have a brain, you can imagine. So my point is this. Evil is a tangible thing, I believe, and sadly, those who don't believe evil exists are operating under the weight of some very serious delusions. So what I would like to do is pose some large, weighty, overarching questions for tonight. And I wanted to pose these questions to some of my absolute favorite conservative fellow talk show hosts who are also religious. They are significant. They are not faux. They are not pretend or fake or fair weather conservatives. And as you heard, they are either pastors themselves or they are individuals for whom religion plays a really significant role in their lives. So what I want to do tonight, my goal is to take everybody on a journey step by step so we all better understand the core principles at issue of religion in the United States, how it's all interwoven, and why this is such a critical issue considering the state of our nation in 2021. So each and every one of you, all 4 of you, I want to thank you ever so kindly for donating your time and your thoughts, because it's just one of those things where, again, any guest that I have on the show seems to be from the East Coast, and whereas it's 8:20 for me right now, for everyone here, it's 11:20 p.m. It's really, really, really late. So I thank you just for that, if for no other reason. The nation is at a point, I believe, where we are at a very critical juncture in its history. And in my opinion, again, there is a big concerted effort to not just belittle those who believe in God and Christianity, but to remove religion. And by dint of that, that means the believers, us, wholesale, with one major exception, that's Islam. That's an issue for an entirely different day, and I'm not going to do that tonight. So the biggest questions first I have for everybody is there such a thing as good? Is there such a thing as evil? And have you personally seen these things played out in your personal lives or surroundings? I'd like to start with Shannon, please. Is there such a thing as good and evil?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can't have one without the other. And the evil helps you to better recognize the good and appreciate it, and the good, the way and how good the good is helps you want to protect it from the evil.
Okay, so that leads me to believe you have seen examples of each.
Yeah, I would say that's fairly accurate. Yes.
Okay.
It's interesting. Like I said, good can't exist without evil. Evil can't exist without good. They're both there. The Bible talks about both from the beginning on through. So if you believe it, then you believe that they both exist. So the Bible is that encyclopedia to teach you chapter and verse on how to protect yourself, how to protect those around you, and how to spread the good as opposed to the evil.
Ralph Chittams, your thoughts? Good, evil?
Well, clearly good and evil exist in the world. The Bible tells us, it teaches us that there is none good, no, not one, except for Jesus himself. But even with that statement is saying that even though we are not inherently good, we have the capacity to do good. And that is the requirement that we have. When we follow the teachings of Jesus Christ, we are, attempting to do good in spite of the presence of evil. And there's always this struggle in the world and within each one of us individually, battling the evil within us to overcome that and to do good. And yet, I've seen the best in people and I've seen the worst in people. I've seen the best in me and I've seen the worst in me. And, if anyone is honest, they would each make that same sort of self-assessment.
Randy Purham, good and evil.
Yes, there is good and evil. We're born, naturally being good, and it takes our environment that we're brought up in to teach us, bad things. And as we grow, it kind of goes back to the Bible, with Proverbs, that it says, "Bring up a child in which you will have them go, and they get older, they shall not part from it." And in that upbringing, that's not just relegated to our parents that's bringing us up. It's also our environment that's bringing us up. Because, it takes a community to raise a person, a child. So to understand evil, we first have to recognize what evil is. And going back to the Bible, even for those that's not religious or even in the faith, they still have to look to a beacon of some kind of structure that teaches inherent goodness. And when they don't do that, or they're not exposed to these things, then they inherently become evil because they don't know it. So it goes back to culture, environment, things. We have to teach what evil is good. Because we all are naturally good to people. I'm hard pressed to find anybody that wakes up every morning and says, "I'm gonna go out and just do evil things all day." It's just part of our environment that's influencing that. I yield the floor, sir.
Ken McCLENTON, good versus evil. And I'm glad you said that, Randy, because boy, do I have a video for everyone. I think this is going to get a lot better. Ken McCLENTON.
Yeah, I believe that we are in a fallen state. And I believe that fallen state requires a moral order. There has to be an example of the good and the evil. In our Creator, we have the example of that which is good. In his creation, we have those that in our fallen state, through free will, have chosen to do that which was opposed to our Creator's vision and mission and goal for us. I think Russell Kirk put it this way, and in fact, I know Russell Kirk put it this way because I'll read directly from his principles. He says, first, the conservative believes that there exists an enduring moral order. The order is made for men, and man is made for it. human nature is a constant and moral truths are permanent. Only a religious people could pursue freedom and liberty. Only a good people would know that it came from God. And so we admit in our everyday lives, even when we say the Our Father, that we profess our sinful nature before God. We all have the ability to do that which is good. We all have the ability to do that which is bad. But we also have to admit that we wouldn't have had the bad part unless we were in a fallen state. And so that fallen state requires that we turn to something or someone greater than ourselves, and the only one who is greater than ourselves is God.
Okay, I think we have a consensus, and I wanted to establish this first. We have a consensus indicating that the folks here tonight in the roundtable believe there is such a thing as good. There is such a thing as evil. And we're unanimous on this. And everybody here believes there is a God. So we've already established that. Evil exists, good exists. So then my next series of questions begin with, is man inherently good or is man inherently evil? And I have to put this in. I come from a very jaundiced background because of the things that I've seen in my life. I will be the first to admit that I am a sinner. I believe in God. I personally believe that man is inherently evil, and I've believed that for years. But I somewhat limited my scope, and I didn't really proffer an expanded series of reasons for my thinking this way. I just believed it, but I didn't attach a bunch of reasons to it. Maybe I should soften that up a little bit by saying people are not, in my opinion, people are not inherently good. But I didn't understand all of the how this all inexorably links up, all the links, the philosophies, the culture, the politics, until I heard this video from Dennis Prager. Now, I'm going to play a video. It's about 5 minutes. And I hope this solicits some feedback from everybody here. And at the conclusion of the video, I want each of you to weigh in and tell me what you think. This expands upon what I think, but is this the way that things really are? So this is, I think it's a great place to go. If you haven't gone to PragerU, this is Dennis Prager, and he asks, are people born good?
There are two important, indeed fundamental questions you have to answer in life. The first is there a God, specifically a moral and judging creator? The second is, are people basically good? Your answer to the second question will shape just about all of your moral, social, and political views, even more than whether you believe in God. That's why a believer and an atheist who have the same views about human nature almost always have the same social and political views. Let me give you some examples. You've probably heard the phrase, poverty causes crime. If you believe that people are basically good, you are likely to believe that poverty or bigotry or some other outside force causes people to commit violent crime. That's the only way you can make sense of the fact that some people commit crimes despite their basically good nature. Something drove them to it. But if you don't believe people are basically good, you're far more likely to blame the criminals themselves, not outside forces, for their actions. One more example. In a society where it is believed that people are basically good, parents and society don't devote great efforts toward making good people. After all, if we're born good, why do you have to teach goodness? On the other hand, those who don't believe we are born all that good understand that parents and society have to undertake major efforts to make children into good adults. Okay then, are people basically good? As I will show, given humanity's history, the answer should be obvious. Of course, human nature isn't basically good. Now, this doesn't mean that people are basically bad. We are born with real potential to do good, but we are not basically good. Take babies. Babies are lovable and innocent, but they're not good. They're entirely self-centered, as they have to be in order to survive. I want mommy, I want milk, I want to be held, I want to be comforted. And if you do not do all these things immediately, I will ruin your life. That's not goodness. That's narcissism. We are born narcissists, preoccupied with number one, ourselves. And if you've ever worked with kids, you know how cruel, how bullying they can be. And don't parents have to tell their child tens of thousands of times, say thank you? Now, why is that? If we're naturally good, wouldn't feeling and expressing gratitude come naturally? And then there is the historical record. Evils, huge evils affecting much of the human race have been the norm. Here goes just a few examples. The Ottoman Turks targeted millions of Armenian Christians for death during World War I. The German Nazi regime murdered 6 million Jews, 2 out of every 3 European Jews, including more than 1 million children and babies. The Soviet communist regime slaughtered about 5 million Ukrainians and about 25 million other innocents. The Chinese communists killed about 70 million Chinese and enslaved the rest of the Chinese people. The North Korean communist regime has built what one can only call the world's largest concentration camp, most of North Korea. In post-colonial Congo in the decade between 1998 and 2008, over 5 million people were murdered and tens, if not hundreds of thousands of women raped. Of course, before that, about 10 million Africans were kidnapped and made slaves in the European slave trade. And another 10 to 18 million Africans were enslaved by Arab slave traders. And let me ask you this. If people are basically good, why does every civilization have so many laws to control human behavior? Knowing all this, those who believe that people are basically good have simply made a decision to believe that and ignore all the evidence. Why do people commit evil? Because it's easy to, because it's tempting to, and yes, because it often accords with human nature. That is why figuring out how to make good people is the single most important project in all of human life. But first, you have to believe it's necessary. I'm Dennis Prager.
Agreed, disagreed. I would love to hear everybody weigh in on this. Shannon, what do you think?
Well, I got to go first, though.
Okay. Randy, what do you think?
I concur with Dennis Prager to an extent. And that extent is, I would say, we are placed on this earth in a 50-50 domain. There are inherently good people placed here, and there are inherently evil people placed. But everything has to have a balance. And if God gave us free will, He gave us free will to do the work of evil. So there are people that are placed here that they just right out the womb chose to be evil in a sense. And that's why I say it goes back to, environment, being brought up in a certain environment. If you're brought up, like for me, I was raised in Chicago, in gangs, around drugs, the whole nine, and raised in a single parent household and everything. But generally, I was a good-natured person. Yes, I've done some evil things. Don't get me wrong, I was not an angel by no extent. But when it came to helping people, I did that. I would stop what I was doing, whatever else, I would help others because I was generally good-natured. And just because of my environment, it was kind of just caught up in doing things, to go along, get along type of thing. So, long story short, I would say it's both. You have people that are placed here to be good, and you have people that are placed here that's just natural. That's just my opinion.
Okay, Ken, what do you think? Ken McCLENTON.
I'm going to agree with Randy in a sense, but I'm going to explain it this way. Our predecessor is whom we fashion our image after. And the first predecessor that we have is the first Adam, who was born in sin, shapen in iniquity. When given the opportunity to act as God upon the earth and lead his woman away from sin, he not only indulged her in her sinful nature, but joined her in her sinful nature, as he was sinful in his own right. So the first Adam is a sinful nature. When you are born again and have accepted Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, your predecessor becomes Jesus the Christ. And let me assure you that there is no perfect person beyond Jesus the Christ. We all fall at one point in our lives through sin. But we are then made good through Christ Jesus. And we are given the option of following him, picking up our cross daily, and denying ourselves. In all those particular spots, we recognize that the sinful nature continues to exist in mankind, but we are given the opportunity in the sanctification walk to experience what God would have in terms of our faith, accepting his faith, and in following him, doing that which is right and righteous unto God. So in a sense, we are in our born-again state, our predecessor being Jesus the Christ. We are made good, but it is not a consistent state for us. We all have to deny ourselves, pick up our cross daily, and follow him. If we never accept Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior, we remain in our fallen state, and the opportunities for being good are different from the opportunities of just doing good.
Okay, either Shannon or Ralph. What do you think?
Okay, I'll jump in so that Shannon can go last. Again, the Bible teaches that because of original sin, all of humanity is born with a sin nature. Again, none of us are born good. If we were born good, then Jesus would have never had to make the sacrifice that he made to reconcile sinful man to a righteous God. Because of original sin, all of us are born with a sin nature. It is our nature to sin. But because God has given each of us the ability to choose, we can choose to accept Jesus Christ as our Lord and as our Savior. And in accepting him as our Savior, it allows God to view us as holy and righteous and good and worthy of salvation. But that acceptance doesn't change our nature. It just allows God to forgive us of that sin nature because we are following the teachings, the beliefs, and we have placed our faith in the salvation in the blood of Jesus as the only mechanism and vehicle through which we can be saved. But again, the Bible is explicitly clear that all humanity is born with a sin nature, and there is not one good person on the face of the earth, although we do have the capacity to do good things.
Shannon Wright, your thoughts? Shannon Wright, do you happen to be there? Oh, there we go.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I like the idea. I would like to believe that we are born good and taught evil, but that would put me in that delusional category of revisionist history. Psalms 51:5 says, shapen in iniquity, molded in sin, from the sin of the original Adams, as Ken touched on. But kind of driving it home in agreement with Ralph, I'd have to say, don't start none, won't be none. And since the dawn of man, we've always started some, which is why there have been different instances of ways for us to redeem ourselves or to be redeemed through the sacrifice that Jesus Christ made on behalf of all of us. So it's kind of like, I'm going to put it to you this way. And BZ, because of your experience in law, you might get this, but the rest of the gentlemen on the panel will. It's kind of like you're young and you're married and you have your kids. And you look at all your kids and you're so happy and they're bright babies. And you look at one, may not even be your child, maybe let's say it's a neighbor's child because we don't want to go there. And you look at that one and you say, ooh, the rest of them are going to have to do good because somebody's going to have to make bail for that one. Now, I know everybody has seen that either in their family or in their neighborhood or in their community. The reality is God gave us a get-out-of-jail-free pass because he knew we were going to need it. And that, unfortunately, is the reality. But with that rather negative, souring reality comes that redeeming hope that if you choose to reach out and open that envelope, you'll get out of jail free pass. It's already been paid for. It's whether you choose to accept it or not. Now, I believe that God has, that good and evil is really too bland a definition.
Okay.
Because when you look in the Bible, like I have a phrase that I tell folk. I am a Christian, but don't get it twisted. Some days you might catch the Old Testament me, and some days you might catch the New Testament me. Don't ever get that twisted. Because in the Old Testament, when you laid hands, it wasn't just in prayer. You did what you had to do, and there are ways of doing that. Now, some folks might say it takes an evil or an anger or an ability to do a, quote, bad thing to be able to do these things. But then there's the argument of defense, especially in certain parts of the Bible. So I say that for survival, life has to be a mix and a balance. We have the genetic code for the original sin, but we also have that get out of jail free pass that gives us a right to choose to disavow that sin and to reach for that higher level to be more like Christ. It's a personal choice every day. For some of us, 2 or 3 times a day.
Okay, what I'm doing and what I'm getting right now is trying to build a foundation. Because, go ahead, sir.
If I may, I want to caveat on what Shannon just said, because I 100% concur with her on her point about there comes a point where, as stewards of Christ's word, of God's word, you are a warrior, just in the natural, in both the spiritual and in the physical. You are a warrior. So you will come across those points in those times where you will seem like you're ungodly because you are either fighting someone or you're defending yourself or defending someone else. And those things, it kind of goes incongruent with turning the other cheek and everything that Jesus teaches in the Bible. But at no point does he say, never defend yourself. So I concur with Shannon there because I always see myself as like a Michael, a St. Michael or a Gabriel type of person when it comes to that. I'll be ready to throw hands in a heartbeat if it came down to that. So I just wanted to throw that in there because I actually concur with that.
Okay, thank you, Randy Purham.
Yeah, but can I interject on that right there?
Sure.
Defending oneself is not a bad thing. It's one of the liberties and freedoms. And in fact, when Jesus is talking to his disciples in the garden and Peter talks about, I have a sword, he said, well, yeah, that will do. It is right and righteous for men to defend themselves against evil. It is the recognition that evil exists and it has at its purpose to steal, to kill, and to destroy. So it is right for men to defend themselves against evil. It is not a sign of whether we are saved or not. It's just a natural selection state of the individual who recognizes that there is good and there is evil in the land. And so I just wanted to make certain that people get from this conversation that defending oneself is not a bad thing. It's an expected thing in human nature. However, oppressing people is a bad thing, and injuring people for the sake of merely being evil is a bad thing.
Okay, what I'm trying to do...
If I could interject?
Oh, please.
I'm sorry.
Please.
If I could interject, I agree with you, but then it kind of goes back to that recipe and that mix and that balance. Because if you are strictly trying to follow the character of Jesus Christ, you're going to continue to turn the other cheek. Now, if you are, as Randy suggested, more of a Michael or a Gabriel, you're going to turn that cheek so you can look behind you and get your sword. But you have to have that balance in order to be able to do all the things that are necessary. But there are those that when you boil it down, look at it, is this good or is this bad? Now, I'm not saying defending yourself is bad, because there's a scripture in the Bible that says to draw blood in the heat and in the dark is all right. But if the sun comes up, meaning if you draw blood, if you kill somebody, if you hurt somebody, if you kill somebody in the defense of others, or when it is unprovoked, it is okay. However, if the sun rises, meaning if you've had time to think on it and meditate on it and still go out and do it, that's vengeance, and that's for God to take care of. So, again, good and evil, yes. People born with sin, yes. With the ability to do good, yes. Is life a mix and a fine recipe balance? Absolutely.
Okay. All right. And like, oh, shoot, I should have done this a while ago. What I decided I was going to do tonight is I wanted to hear more of everyone talk about the various topics here tonight. So in the process of doing that, I'm not going to be doing the promotions. I just want to remind everybody of this.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
And to continue and build on all of that, we pretty much agree that there is such a thing as good. We pretty much agree that there is such a thing as evil. We're not necessarily in unanimity in terms of are people inherently good or are people inherently bad, but we have poured that foundation. We've got those blocks, and I'm going somewhere with all of this tonight. We've established that man should always strive to be good, may or may not be born that way, and it brings me to a question that I posed back on my blog on January 3rd of 2010, that long ago, 11 years ago. So I was listening to a radio station, and it really doesn't matter which one, and a caller indicated that religion was a matter of heart. And the host said the opposite, that it was necessary to hold, your religion in your heart, but it was additionally and equally, if not more so, necessary to hold your religion in an edifice like a church. There's a reason I'm going here. So that made me think for a moment about my place and how I hold my own personal religious beliefs. I'm not a joiner per se. Anybody that knows me, that I'm not necessarily a people person. That's been beaten out of me over the years. And my life doesn't revolve around the approval of other humans, and it never really has. But it's really only in the past, I don't know, maybe 5-10 years or so, and certainly now that I've retired, that I've taken time to consider my relationship with God. But a strange thing happened. Not bad. I had a friend at work. He was retired even back then in 2010. And he came back from a European vacation. He presented me with an object he'd acquired at the Vatican. And it was a cross on a chain blessed by Pope John Paul II in May of 2004. And since the moment he gave that to me, I've worn it every day. Not certainly because I'm pious or sanctified or necessarily even a good man. I'll be the first one to admit that I am a sinner. But instead, it forces me, it reminds me every morning when I look in the mirror to remember my place in the grand scheme and to actually try to be a better man. I don't belong to a church. I don't attend weekly, even on Christmas. Jesus did either. He didn't either. Wherever he went, he carried his Father. So what I'd like to ask everyone here is, where do you guys carry your beliefs in God? Church or heart? Ken McCLENTON.
I've been thrown out of enough churches to know that corporate prayer and corporate worship are important indeed, but keeping the commandments and keeping the scriptures in one's heart and soul on a daily basis works to the end of having a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. I'm not telling individuals that you should not worship together, because people will, of course, recite the scripture in Hebrews that it is ordered that men and women come together and worship corporately. There is a great bounty to be held when we can come together and worship in the beauty of holiness together. In the book of Proverbs, it speaks to the fact that the rich and poor brought together and worship to meet each other's needs. But I never want anyone to believe that the only way that you can find Christ is if you went to church this Sunday. In fact, many people find Christ before they even make it to the church. And hopefully that's because there are ministers who are out there preaching the gospel on a daily basis and encouraging people with Bible study and with prayer, and another form of corporate worship and a smaller form of it. But there are many people today who have become exasperating and annoying, that if you don't have a mega choir and a mega church and a mega pastor with a megaphone, then you're not doing it the right way. And God brings a body of believers together for a particular purpose, and that's to meet each other's needs. And I think that is what corporate worship should be and is divined by God to be.
Anyone else, Ralph or Randy or Shannon?
So the foundation of our Christian faith is our personal relationship. So when we talk about a personal relationship, clearly we're talking about that's a relationship that we have within us, that is within ourselves, it's in our heart, it's in our mind, it's in our body, it's in our soul. It's everything about us is to be in relationship and in fellowship with God. So it's a personal relationship. So it's definitely a heart thing, it's a head thing, it's a full body experience. But again, the Bible does teach us that we are not to forsake assembling ourselves together. Now, what is the purpose for that? Well, the Bible teaches us that, as iron sharpens iron, the countenance of a man is sharpened by the aid of his brother. So we come together in fellowship to aid one another, but the core of our relationship with God is personal, it's individual, it's intimate.
Okay, Randy or Shannon?
I would have to agree with Ralph 100%. Throughout time, throughout the Bible, throughout church, throughout different ministry programs, scriptures, pamphlets, flyers, you hear and see people talk of your personal walk or your personal relationship. So I will say this: if you don't have that personal one-on-one relationship, it don't matter if you're in a church or not, because the things that you would get from fellowship would be strengthened if you already have the beginnings of that in that personal relationship. There are too many folks right now that do whatever the heck they want to do, with who they want to do it, how they want to do it, where they want to do it, and then spend 2 hours on Sunday to repent, get rid of all of that, and go back and do it again. So if you come at it like that, without that personal relationship, without really trying to walk that walk, and not just say those phrases for those 2 hours, that's built in a relationship. It's like a marriage. It's a relationship. You get out of it what you put in it. So if you don't have that, it doesn't matter if you're in a church or not.
There's an interesting statistic out that the majority of women who have abortion self-identify as Christian. So going to church, and there's I've seen this a few places that and it says, going to church doesn't make you a Christian any more than walking into a garage turns you into a car. But simply because you go to church, that doesn't prove anything unless you have that personal relationship with God that you carry with you the other 6 days and 22 hours of the week outside those 2 hours that you spend in church trying to impress your neighbor with how holy you are.
Randy, your thoughts?
I concur with everyone. Me personally, I've grown over the last, I would say, maybe 5-10 years max. No, I would say 5 to 7 years. 5 to 7 years, I increasingly grew kind of pessimistic to the tradition, not the tradition, the modern day church, and going in attendance, because I've been in many churches, especially in the military construct, going to military churches and churches like in a nearby town type of thing, and it became a turnoff because you could see it was for show. It wasn't going to church. You wasn't going to church to actually, you would listen to the sermon, but the behind the scenes of the church. And when I say the behind the scenes, you just look across the congregation and you can see the fakeness and just the showmanship that was going on in the church, and it increasingly became a turnoff. And so I would say, it goes back to, you do have to have a personal relationship with God to be able to even tolerate being in the presence of that, and just say, you know what, okay, I'm here to receive the word from someone you appointed to be a shepherd of the flock, but at the same token, I can be cordial and be cool and be social with everyone that's here, that actually took the time out of their schedules and their lives or whatever to assemble. But it goes more so, you have to have that personal relationship, and you have to have that understanding, that divine understanding. And it goes back to Jeremiah 1:5. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew who you were, and I set you, and I set you up, and I put you out there. So when you understand that, you can find yourself in amongst anybody, anywhere, in any kind of church setting. And but for me, going to a church, a physical church, is not something that's on my radar. And it goes, once again, going back to Matthew 18:20. If there's 2 or 3 or more gathered amongst us, I am with you. In my household, there's 4 of us in here at any given time. So there you go. And when we get out there into the social settings, when you surround yourself around like-minded people that also believe in God, believe in the Word, and try to live their lives according to the word, then you're okay. That's a church right there in itself. The church, the idea of the church is a construct, is a social construct. When we talk about, you know, a physical setting, a physical building that you have to drive to every Sunday, that's a social construct. Church can be anywhere at any time.
If I'm understanding everybody properly, essentially what you're all saying is that, yes, first heart, then church, as long as it's not a faux situation. And there have been some really great analogies made here tonight, as a matter of fact. I heard this recently, or I read it.
Excuse me, VZ?
Sure.
VZ?
Mm-hmm.
Since Pastor Shannon is opening her church in a couple of weeks or so, whatever,
okay.
I want to ask her if she's serving brownies. Because if she is, then I'll come.
If she bakes it, you will come?
We will be serving refreshments to everyone who is not named Ken McCLENTON, because he don't know how to get to talking. How about that? Which means Mrs. Ken McCLENTON is more than welcome to come get some brownies.
Once again, the parking lot ministry for me.
I have to say this. We have had some challenges in Baltimore. Baltimore has been in the news in the last couple of years, not for one good reason I could think of, as a matter of fact. But over those times, I have to say, I have to thank Ralph and his wife. They have made it their priority to squeeze in some of the things that we're trying to do in Baltimore. And I want to say thank you for that. And that we learn and lead by example. So, Ken, I will rescind that. If you do try to find your way to Baltimore, yes, there will be perhaps a corner of a brownie. I'm trying to be more like Christ today. I'm trying to be good today.
You're being very gracious indeed. So we're going step by step. Folks, tonight I'm speaking to Shannon Wright. I'm speaking to Ralph CHITTAMS. I'm speaking to Randy Purham. I'm speaking to Ken McCLENTON. Again, thanks to all four of you for being here tonight. And I'm going building block by building block, foundation by foundation, concrete pour, and putting up some walls. And I'm eventually going to be going someplace that I think will reach sort of a critical mass, because the topic tonight is, what is the state of religion today in the United States and why does it matter? And I think it matters in terms of absolute criticality. Some people have said to me that they think that it's more important now, more critical to attend a church now in order to show support for churches, for attendance, for unity, for support, for coherence, in order to illustrate the solidarity of those people who are religious in contrast to those secularists, and or want to eliminate religion and demand that religion and its adherents basically we have no place in a modern, what they term a modern society today. So let's move into churches themselves, and I wanted to get to discuss the two things that frequently you're told in families you will never discuss: politics and religion. So one of the most fundamental questions that I have, and then I'm going to pose the question, read a quote, and then I'd like to come back with your thoughts. Politics and religion. Should politics enter into a topic that pastors address to their congregants? And I have a quote by a gentleman named Brother Marcus Rogers I put on social media. And he says this: when is the last time your pastor or these big-name preachers you listen to preached a message that made the world mad? When is the last time one of these big Christian music artists took a stance that had the world upset at them? When is the last time you saw one of these big names in the kingdom preach something or take a stance that made Hollywood and the media lash out at him? When is the last time you saw them take a stance that cost them money or followers? The apostles, prophets, and Jesus constantly had the world coming at their neck. Their messages made people angry and made the demons in folks manifest. But he says truth will do that. So politics and religion together, do they mesh? Or perhaps the overarching question is, do they have to? Must they mesh? Is Marcus Rogers right?
So, if I could jump in.
Sure.
They absolutely have to mesh. Ask me why. Go ahead. Ask me why.
By the way, hey, Shannon, it's interesting you brought that up. Why do they both have to mesh, politics and religion?
So, if you look at the Bible, in the book of Exodus, there were conversations that were had between Moses and his father-in-law. And those foundational conversations were the beginning of the first legal, judicial, court, mediation kind of process. Okay? Throughout the Bible, you see references to those who should be able to mediate and settle differences. And they are always folks that were followers of the gospel. Now, the reason is, if, as we have all stated here, we are genetically predispositioned towards sin, then you doggone sure really need to be careful and make sure that the folks that are metering out, quote, justice are folks that are trying to at least turn their back from that sin and follow the examples of Christ. From the beginning of time, that's kind of how it was set up. So now, when you get to that point where the genetic sin is taken over, right, you're going to do everything in your power to remove the good guy from the equation because you want to bring on Sodom and Gomorrah Part 2. You're looking to bring all that on. You want those things to come so that it can be all about you, all about what you're trying to do, all about what you're trying to covet that you're not supposed to have, what you're trying to steal, what you're trying to lie, adultery, all them things that you're not supposed to do. You're going to try and remove all the folks that might tell you no from that equation so you can do what you want to do. You can't do that if there is indeed religious principles. Forget religious. Christian principles, Christ-like principles, bounding all around the political spectrum. You will have chaos, and we are seeing that chaos. There is systematic removal of the things that we have hold sacred and dear, that are traditional, that are biblical, because you have to remove those to get that sinful nature, that expression of the sinful nature that you're looking for. That's what we're seeing today. That's why there is a criminal epidemic that I don't really care what Biden tries to do. He's not going to be able to fix because he's asking the wrong people. Biden asked, and I kid y'all not, if y'all follow this, y'all know. Biden asked the mayor of 7 different municipalities that were having crime problems, what did they think is the problem? What did they think? So Biden asked Mayor Brandon Scott of Baltimore for his thoughts and his input. Now, I don't even know if the boy is really old enough to drive or drink or vote yet. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that.
It's okay.
In any event, when you don't look to Christ and to God for your solutions to the problems, and you look to man, and man that is questionable whether he's man or still boy, you're not going to get the kind of responses that will build up and strengthen communities, neighborhoods, families, and society. You will get the decay and the chaos that you are seeing today. So if you remove religion and the Bible and principles from politics, you have the second coming of Sodom and Gomorrah, and they all going to hell. How's that?
Shannon.
Yes, sir.
Randy, Ralph, or Ken?
Well, when you examine the foundation of this country, one of the first things that you realize is that almost every colony had a state religion and a state Christian religion. It is inarguable that this country was founded upon Christian principles. Now, people come up with this concept of the separation of church and state. There is nothing in our foundation document, nothing. The Constitution, the Declaration, the Federalist Papers, there is nothing in any of the foundation documents of this country which states country, that men of faith would exercise that faith in the judicious governing of this country. This concept of a separation of church and state didn't even pop up until 1802 in a letter that Jefferson wrote to some preachers somewhere. So the foundation of this nation is built upon Christian values. So if the foundation of this nation is built upon Christian values, what happens to any building when you kick out its foundation? It crumbles like that condo in Florida. And what we're seeing right now is the crumbling of a great nation because we are removing the foundational underpinning, the Christian underpinning that have girded up the building of this great nation. And like I said, all one has to do is just look at all of the founding documents, read the Constitution, Declaration, Federalist Papers. All of those documents clearly outline and articulate that this, without question, is a Christian nation.
It says that our rights come from God, not government. And that's what leftists, that's why they hate the Constitution, the founders. They want government to replace God.
Absolutely. And you know, you talk about, just to segue a little bit back into the other conversation, you know, talking about, you know, going to church. Well, Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden are supposedly devout Christians. You know, Nancy Pelosi every year makes a big show on Ash Wednesday of going to church to get ashes put on her forehead. But those are the two biggest proponents of abortion that you have in Washington, D.C. So again, simply crossing the threshold of the church house doesn't make anyone a Christian.
Absolutely agreed. Anybody else want to weigh in? Because I have a quote from another pastor coming up. Then I have another fundamental question that I'd like everybody here to weigh in. Any other comments that anybody else has at this point?
I would say, you know, turn your attention to 2 Chronicles 7:14. If my people, which are called by my name, humble themselves and seek my face, and I will forgive the sin and heal their land. That right there in itself tells you that with the social ills that we are embarking on in society, that we have to understand that place, that domain, as in terms of where it is in life. Okay, so when we're talking about homosexuality, LGBTQ rights, and everything else, that's a social issue. When we talk about abortion, that's a social issue. All these things are already pre-addressed in the Bible. So for anyone to sit up and say that they are of any kind of religious entity, removing whether they're a Christian, they're a Buddhist, or whatever the case, they're falling under some kind of doctrinal principles that are somewhat of a resemblance to the Bible. So they should already know where they stand on these things. And if they sit there and say, well, you know, times has changed, then you're saying that God has changed. And he has not said that he has changed. He has not came out the sky and told us that he's changed. So we look for ways to try to be hypocritical and justify it by utilizing the word. That's number one. Number two, we have to understand that when we're in a church setting, a lot of these pastors, they're starting to bend to the will of the social justice warriors that's out there by trying to find a way to justify these things. Because I'm really trying to understand how is it possible that you have pastors that are saying it is okay to have an abortion or it's okay to be gay when it clearly delineates in the Bible that these things are an abomination.
And that's
go ahead.
that's the journey that we're taking tonight, because I am leading us all to a certain place. Any other thoughts that anybody else has?
I just want to say, I'll be very strict here. There's no doggone way that you can profess your faith in God, because God gave you this faith. God didn't give you a religion. A religion is something that's created by the hands of men to satisfy and to appease the desires and hearts of men. God didn't look at our hearts because he knew that they were wrought with sin. He created the faith necessary for us to overcome sin and death. So I believe that the walk with Christ is faith, not religion. Anything else is religion. Here's the second part of that. I don't know how you can be anything other than a conservative and believe in Jesus Christ, because we as conservatives believe that we are in a fallen state and that a moral order is required. There is no other political belief out there that even broaches close to that. It is the only one that aligns itself with the concept that we need God. God didn't need us. So I'll be as strict as to say, I don't know how you can be a Bible-believing Christian and anything other than a conservative.
Okay. Agreed. That is rather strict constructionist. I'm going to read you a quote from a pastor that I don't think you had anticipated tonight, but I think it's every bit as applicable. And then once I read this quote, then I want to ask you again all of you, a very fundamental question. This is from Pastor, well, I'll tell you his name at the end. First they came for the socialists, and I didn't speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me. And there was no one left to speak for me, Pastor Martin Niemöller. So the overarching question, politics and religion, does Christianity have the luxury of not wanting to be involved in politics in 2021?
No, we do not.
No.
Like I was saying a few minutes ago, everything that's going on in society today is directly tied to religion, faith, the whole construct. They're hand in hand. John the Baptist was killed because he went against the polity of, the establishment. And they did not like how he railed against their words. Socrates was killed because he went against the establishment. And he did not follow the social constructs because he was preaching, or not rather preaching, but he was teaching people how to think for themselves. And so these are all the things that we're seeing right now in modern day times. We're seeing a Marxist-driven takeover of our society and the castigation of people who are promoting and preaching and teaching others how to think for themselves, this cancel culture. So, yes, it's an imperative that the preachers, churches, those who are calling themselves that are walking in God's likeness, be involved in politics. There's a book called Seven Mountain Prophecy. And people, I highly encourage people to read that book and understand that everything that we're living in life right now resides in one of the 7 domains of society, and it's by Johnny Enlow. Education, religion, the 7 different institutions of society, media, the whole shebang. We all have to understand that you have to be involved in all 7 domains to take control or have some semblance of control of what's going on in order for evil, as we was talking about at the beginning of the show here, in order for evil to not take over and taint our society, which in a large sense, like Ken was saying, it's already tainted. we are already going down the path of being a godless nation. And in order for us to get that back, we need to come out of our conservatism and be more of warriors and take things back under control.
Ralph Chittams wrote in the chat room, and folks, if you are not already in the chat room, go to shrmedia.com, shrmedia.com. A lot of great people in the chat room, but Ralph recently wrote, 501c3 status has been weaponized to keep churches under control. What most people do not know is a church does not have to accept 501c3 status. A church can operate without such status. And a very salient point that is. So, we know there's good, we know there's evil. Pretty much, I'm assuming I have a consensus here with everyone in this roundtable discussion is that you cannot separate politics from religion. Is there unanimity in that?
Yes, absolutely. They are inextricably linked.
Okay. So I want to get into some specific stories now. I heard this today. Most recently, I found these stories, this one in particular, from our neighbors to the north, Canada. And as I go through this, I want everybody to understand the way that this is framed and the manner in which it is couched. This is from the Daily Telegraph about churches being burned in Canada. This is just a few days ago. Burned churches stir deep indigenous ambivalence over faith of forefathers. Remember that headline. After hundreds of unmarked graves were found at Canada's former Catholic-run residential schools, churches in First Nations territories have been destroyed by suspected arson. What they don't tell you is it's not just those. For more than a century, a clapboard church set amid rolling hills in Western Canada has been a spiritual home for the Upper Similkameen Indian Band. For more than a century, to build St. Anne's, residents of an Indian reserve traveled 40 miles to the closest town, hauling lumber back to their community by horses and wagons. But early last Saturday, thick smoke filled the air and flames ripped through the aging wooden structure near Headley in British Columbia. By the time local fire crews arrived, the church had already been burned to the ground. So the answer to that, when there's an issue, appears to be, with leftists, burning. And the community's fire chief said basically nothing could be done. And yet, though the headline says burned churches stir deep indigenous ambivalence, buried in the story is this: the church meant so much to all of us, especially our ancestors. Carrie Allison, an elder who helped maintain the church, said in a statement, "When your heart turns to rage, it is not healthy for you or your community." So, the burning of churches wasn't limited. They took down some other churches. There were pieces or incidents of vandalism. So Justin Trudeau said that we have to do better. Nearly 24 in just recent weeks, 24 churches in Canada have been burned or vandalized across the country, 8 of which are in the First Nations territories. So the bulk of them are not there and have nothing to do with the bodies being found in unmarked graves. So there's something, as is common with leftist journalists like this, left out of the article and the other articles that I wrote entirely, and that's this. Did anybody offer any proof whatsoever or any investigation into the accuracy or the validity of these accusations? Who did it? Why? When? Do we know? And if this is how we act now, why are there any mosques left standing in any portion of the civilized world? The story seems to be now, especially with religion, we'll burn first, and if you're lucky, we may ask questions later. And then there was an individual named Harsha Walia who said, And this is the head, Harsha Walia is the head of the British Columbia Civil Liberties Association. In response to the church burnings, she wrote in a Twitter piece, "Burn it all down." That was it. Now, it's interesting to note that you can't even see her tweet unless she personally approves you, of course, because she's a leftist coward. And I happen to immure a copy of that photographically. And she's, in her Twitter, she says she's an author, Border and Rule, Undoing Border Imperialism, Seek, tweets own race, feminism, empire, capitalism, migration, she and her. Very important to include her pronouns. But wait, there's more. We seem to have conveniently forgotten everything that happened to the Masterpiece Cake Shop owner, a guy named Jack Phillips. Multiple times he was sued. He won in SCOTUS. He's going back to SCOTUS again. So I want to ask all of you, because you've all seen it, you've all been there, we all watched this past year as huge warehouse stores, fulfillment centers, businesses owned by big corporations, they were allowed to continue to operate under Wuhan 19, while literally, and I'd like your experiences on this, mom and pop churches were put under orders from opening, or if they were allowed to open, they were under mandates, not forced on other entities. By the way, I should point out, while those who created those self-same orders ignored the orders, they ate, they dined, they drank, they vacationed wherever the hell they wanted because they could. Did any of you experience anything like this yourselves, either last year or this year? Randy.
I have been.
Or Ken.
I'm sorry.
Sure, go ahead, Ken.
Yeah. I will tell you, I have been one of the most adamant forms of opposition to the modern church since the introduction of COVID. No one can explain to me how being in a church of 100 people can lead you to death by COVID, but being in a Walmart with 1,000 people won't. Unfortunately, the modern pastors, preachers, bishops, archbishops, you name it, whatever title is in this week, apostle or whatever, are the biggest cowards and the most weak individuals to uphold the First Amendment right to worship in this country. And I will say to you right now that we have developed, and this goes to what Jack is saying in the chat roll, we have state churches and or government churches, and we have free independent churches. The free independent churches upheld not only the Constitution, but the gospel of Jesus Christ. And they met and they sang and they took the risk of being sued and being fined, and they took the state to court as they did in California, and they won.
Yes.
They won. And the bottom line is this. There are too many cowards, too many effeminate, too many sinful, weak men and women that have been lifted up to powers of position and as well leadership in the state churches. And those are the churches that go out and they make their members become a part of the political scene by exploiting the Marxist doctrines that they exploit and speak of from the pulpits every Sunday morning. The Black Liberation Theology, or Liberation Theology, the LGBTQRSTUVWXYZ, add the P narratives, the whole idea of feminism, the whole idea of Black Lives Matter, the whole idea of Me Too movement. All of that you will find in the churches of today, which are weak and have no power against sin and death. I'll stop there.
Randy, Shannon, or Ralph?
Well, I concur with Ken. I concur with Ken. Living in Italy at the start and the height of the outbreak of this pandemic, it was, and that's what I said, the pandemic. I saw firsthand how those that resided on the right were skeptical of what was going on, and those on the left just automatically became sheep herd, and they just followed along with whatever was being told. And in the city of Naples, some businesses stayed open. They defied the orders. It was the decrees. It was decrees that was put out by the prime minister there. At the time, it was Conte, Prime Minister Conte. They defied them. They was like, "Yeah, screw you. Everything's fine because you let these big stores stay open, but they only limited to 10, 15 people at a time. My shop only holds 5 people open, 5 people at a time. So what is the difference here?" And we saw that, and I was able to leave Italy, fly into Paris, stay overnight in Paris in a hotel, and people were just lollygagging in the lobby, no mask, no nothing. We was eating in restaurants, and then we got into Texas. I got into Austin Airport, got a rental car, drove an hour and some change, and we got into the hotel, and everything. They was like, "Oh, you have to put on the mask." I'm like, "You got the pool open." You got the breakfast bar open. Like, are you kidding me right now? Walmart is open, and everybody's running around with masks. And some people, just defying it, saying that they're not wearing a mask and everything else. And I'm saying, I came from overseas. I'm like, if I was to be exposed to COVID, I think I would have caught it by now, given that I've been transatlantic and crammed on planes and everything else. So what's really going on? Why are we not talking about the seasonal flu and the colds anymore? So yes, I look to these leaders, both in the religious sector and in the social sector, and I say to them, stop playing these games with us.
And yet,
if you have a church, and you're bowing to the officials of keeping your church closed because of COVID restrictions, then go home. You should defy that. You should defy that and say, no, we're not going to close. If Walmart down the street can be open, we can be open. Period.
And yet, churches were one of the first institutions
to close.
Shut down.
Yes. Insane.
The theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer, he wrote a treatise on this concept of cheap grace. And what we're witnessing right now in the American church is the fruition of what happens when you keep grace without sacrifice, repentance, and obedience. See, being a Christian in the United States for the past 200 years has been too easy. What did it cost anyone in this country to be a Christian? It cost you nothing. So people could play at being Christians. And so the organized church got comfortable. It got lazy. It got complacent. It started to rely not on God because it didn't need to. Instead, it started relying on government, on tax rates, on contracts, on sweetheart deals, on the pastors being appointed to boards and commissions, political patronage. Because in this country, for the past 200 years, being a Christian was made easy. And so now, when the government says close, the churches have not had a history of having to rely on Christ and Christ alone, like our brothers in Africa and other third and second world countries. All they had was Jesus. So they learned to rely on God. In this country, because our faith was made cheap, our grace was made cheap, we stopped relying on God because we no longer had to. And that's why it was so easy for the government to control the churches, because unfortunately, most leaders in churches now are more Democrat than they are Christian.
I wouldn't disagree
Amen.
with that. And I have another story coming up here, which is going to go
Can I add
into
just
that
one more-
situation.
VZ?
Sure, Ken.
VZ, can I add just one more thing here? And I am enthralled by the words of both Randy and Ralph. And I just want to join them with this. If you know for a fact that you belong to a state church, it is on you by the power of the Holy Spirit to find a free church to worship in. Your spirit and your wealth speaks greater volumes in the state church than it does in a free church. In a free church, it's about Jesus. In a state church, it's about the prosperity message for the day.
And here's something else we need to think about. Our Christian faith tells us that, we don't know the day nor the hour when our life will end, but God knows the exact moment where he is going to call each and every one of us home. That's standard Orthodox theology. Now, if God knows when he's going to call us home, hiding in your house away from a virus that is so microscopically small that it'll pass through anything that you can commercially buy is not going to stop God from calling you home. If it's time for you to meet your Maker, you are going to meet him, whether it is by COVID, whether it is by heart attack, whether it's by getting hit by a bus, or whether it's simply falling down a flight of stairs. The message is live your life, because God is the ultimate author. He is the Alpha and the Omega. He is the beginning and he is the end, and nobody can end your life before God says so. And nothing can end your life before God says so.
Absolutely. Shannon Wright, what were some of your experiences in Baltimore?
Well, everything was closed in Baltimore. Churches, businesses, restaurants, everything. For quite some time. Matter of fact, the state of emergency was just lifted July 1st. We are still dealing with gaps in the supermarkets and the big box stores. We have one of those interesting things going on here that a lot of cities suffer with, which is food deserts and food insecurity. And the supply chain interruption from COVID really just made that exponentially worse.
Yeah.
We had larger than other municipalities, larger numbers than other municipalities of folks getting COVID. Not, you know what, I'm going to stop trying to be politically correct. It was a toe-up hot mess here in Baltimore. How about that?
That works. That works.
I do believe that God's already predestined when you're supposed to go home, but I don't believe that it is our job to try and speed up that time or process. But I think that people trying to find what that means for themselves caused a wide range of responses and reactions, from those that would not leave their home, some because of pre-existing health conditions, some because of whatever was in their head. I don't know. We tried to strike a balance of being out and doing what we had to do. I mean, my campaign for mayor was during COVID. So it sure taught a new experience in how to campaign and be about that life in terms of politics and trying to move a campaign forward. Because I don't know of any way to be able to run a campaign from your basement.
No, not with any percentile of efficacy at all.
Well, Joe Biden did it.
And that's kind of said that way.
Well, look at the support he has as compared to everybody else here tonight.
Absolutely.
No, I'm referring to as cheating.
We still had to go to events. We still went to forums. We still did what we had to do. A lot of hand washing, a lot of dry skin, hand washing going on. We lost a lot of folks to COVID in our family. So early on, when people were saying, I don't even know anybody that's had it, it's not real. Unfortunately for us, some of our folks got it real early and are now what they not so endearingly term long haulers. So it's been an experience. It's been an experience, But I have to say this: I hear you all. You notice I've been quiet for a minute because I hear you all talking about COVID, and I hear you all talking about if God says it's your time, and I get that, and I hear it. But there are also things that we know that we can do to take care of ourselves. That in larger cities with a higher number or a higher poverty ratio, those things aren't happening. So the folks that are living in food deserts and not getting the ability to get food healthy food, the folks that, because they're not eating correctly, have a higher than normal amount of cases of high blood pressure and diabetes are not going to fare so well. When you have a city that is poorly run and you have a large population of senior citizens not properly cared for, they're not going to fare so well. So depending on where you are, I guess could change your perspective and your experience. But when you have an illness like COVID in a city that on a good day couldn't be compared to being run well for several decades, it's going to cause chaos. And because we've had our current mayor in Baltimore, Little Boy Blue, that wasn't nice, but Little Boy Blue, whatever.
Little Boy Blue.
Because he's always sitting there on TV talking to the governor or the former president or the current president looking like he's got his hand out saying, please, sir, may I have some more? Instead of hitching up your stuff, tighten up your pants, and going out and being a mayor and leading somebody somewhere. But that's a story for another time.
Yes.
But when you have a city that's been run by failed policies for decade after decade after decade, you don't have adequate systems in place. You don't have adequate structures in place for your businesses to be able to survive and thrive, and sometimes even come out better and stronger than they went into COVID. You don't have systems in place for your schools, for your students to be able to go to school and learn, because heavens to Murgatroyd, before COVID, we didn't have heat in the winter or air in the summer. So when you are in a city that has been mismanaged and misrun for so long, when something like COVID happens, you have a choice. You can either use that as an opportunity to get on a bigger soapbox with your hand out further, begging, or you can use that crisis, where the greatest tragedy and the greatest tragedy is the best time for the biggest success. But unfortunately, in Baltimore, we didn't take that route. And when I say we, I really don't mean myself. but I mean the collective pool of voters, chose to bury their heads further in the sand and go with the devil that they know that got them in the situation where we're in now. So when I hear you all talking about religion and politics, and then I hear the switch to COVID, and I hear in there about community and rebuilding and all of those things, the simplest thing that I hope all of the listeners here tonight get, if the preachers would preach as it's written in the book, if the leaders would lead as the words in their oath dictate, and the teachers would teach according to the principles of good dang blasted common sense, half of our cities, our towns, and our suburbs would not look the way they do now.
Well, and if people were competent.
But you know what? No, wait, hold on. Because even if you got a larger than normal percentage of people that are as dumb as a bag of rocks, if you got preachers that are preaching, teachers that are teaching, and leaders that are leading, even they will get where they need to be.
And the people keep reelecting the same leaders. Correct me if I'm wrong. There are portions in Baltimore that still look like they did in 1968 following the riots.
It's very difficult to tell which were the riots from the 60s and which were the riots from 2015. Because burning buildings and decay kind of all blends together after a couple of years. So it all kind of just looks like the chaos and the whew, Lord, like the falling apart. Let me tell you something. The only way you have a sunlight in your house that's big enough to grow a tree is if you are either a millionaire or you in Baltimore. You can drive down the street and see where roofs used to be and where trees are now growing on the inside. And these are buildings that are still standing. These abandoned and decrepit properties are in between properties that people own. There are stories in the news here about how there was a property owner whose house failed an inspection because the foundation of her house was crumbling, making it a safety hazard. And it was crumbling because the two decaying properties on the sides of her owned by the city had fallen into such disrepair that they were actually leaning on her house and shifting it off its foundation. When you look at leadership that allows things like that to happen, we're not seeing leaders that are leading from the Old Testament or the New Testament. We're seeing people that are following that principle of the separation of church and state so I can get the good principles out and do what I want to do. People, leaders don't take care of the poor because it's not fun. Leaders don't worry about if you got food, if there's a supermarket, because it's not sexy. They don't worry about those things. And our church leaders, if you want to call them that, are too busy chasing which next model of what car they're going to get to actually realize that that book that they hold up for 2 hours on Sunday actually gives them a step-by-step blueprint of how to take care of the least of us, of a cycle, of a yearly cycle on how to take care of the widowed, the orphans, sojourners, new folk in your land, all of that. But we turn our backs on that because most of the churches that you have out there that are these mega churches, when you asked about, and Ralph pointed out about the 501c3, see, I can't talk about you according to the principles of my Bible if I've got my hand out waiting for you to stick that next grant up in my hand.
Isn't that funny how that works out?
You know, and to caveat what Shannon just said there, in the military, we had the saying, well, I guess we still say it. I know I say it all the time. There's a difference between leadership and likership. And leadership is doing the things that may be unpopular to everyone, but it's going to bring them home at the end of the day. And likership is, giving appeasement to what's popular and making sure that you don't piss anybody off in the process of in the tenureship of your position. And that's the problem that we're seeing in society today. This is both in the church, in politics, and everything else. That's why I keep my platform open to anyone who can see. I'm like, I don't care if you like what I'm saying or not. I want to be transparent because I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to provide leadership, and so should you. Mm-hmm.
And I think
that's what we're seeing. There's a paradigm shift that we're seeing in society right now. Is so many people are gravitating and looking for somebody that they like versus somebody that they need to be following or need to be leading.
Absolutely.
They're looking for likership.
Absolutely. And you know what? I am not an ageist. I don't believe that you have to be a certain age to be able to lead. But doggone it, you have to have been able to tie your shoes for more than 20 years to be able to lead a city.
Sure.
Okay? No,
another problem with all of this, another huge problem that we have with all of this is gullibility. And this goes back to what has been done systematically through education, where we have spent the last 2 generations teaching people what to think as opposed to teaching people how to think. Like if you look at these alleged COVID numbers that they've been throwing out, even the CDC has had to go back and say that they have wildly overstated the number of people who have died because of COVID. There's a difference between dying with COVID and dying of COVID. And if you just look at the numbers, the number of people who died from the seasonal flu, the number of people who died from pneumonia last year was damn near 0. But the number of people who died allegedly because of COVID skyrocketed. The CDC has even admitted that those numbers were artificially inflated. Now, we can sit here and we can discuss why those numbers were artificially inflated, but there is no question that those numbers were artificially inflated. Now, I personally think it was done on purpose to control the masses, to keep people under control. But we can't just say, we should have done this and we should have done that because, 600,000 Americans died from COVID. No, that's a lie. That is not just a lie. It's a damn lie, and it's a damn lie from the pit of hell. Because most of those people who died did not die from COVID. They died from cancers. They died from the seasonal flu. They died from pneumonia. But because the political agenda was at stake, they took all of those deaths and wrapped it up under COVID to keep people under control. And so why did they go after the church? Keep the churches closed? Because the church is the one institution, the Christian church, is the one institution that gives people hope. And if you want to break someone's spirit, the thing you take away from them is hope.
I've agreed with you for most of this, Ralph, but I think that point, yes, if you take away the hope, yes. However, you got, in Baltimore, there's 4 corners on a block, right? You got 50-50 chance that there's either going to be a church or a liquor store on the corner. But the churches, even before COVID, see, this is why I said that this would have been a great opportunity to have great success and a time to hit that pause button and recalibrate the course trajectory that we're on. But it didn't happen. It would have been the perfect time for it to happen if the pastors were willing to actually be pastors.
No, the pastors are slaves. The pastors are slaves, and they're slaves to the Democrat Party plantation. That's why nothing happened. There's no difference between the modern urban pastor and the black field hand who oversaw the other slaves out in the field.
You're absolutely doggone right. You know what? You're absolutely right. When you can't drive from one side of this city to the other, and you see more people standing outside the churches in line waiting for Massa to hand them a box. Yes, I said Massa, to hand them a box of something as we watch the second coming of slavery, then you see people actually going in the churches to worship. Now, you've got folk outside with traffic cones to be able to keep these lines straight for people to get these boxes. But you don't ever see a traffic jam like that to get in the church. And this goes back again when it goes back to what Christianity has become in America. And Ralph was speaking to the fact that grace is cheap, that it's a warfare mentality in Christ Jesus today. Give me your poor that we may massage them with an appeasement strategy for them to stay poor but happy. Give us your weak that we may keep them pepped up for 2 hours and then encourage them to come back next week. Listen, I appreciate the peps on the street with the hose because you know what their job is, and they're proud of it. You doggone Skippy, because they're real about theirs. Exactly. Yeah, absolutely right. You have black men, and I'll say this because I'm speaking from the point of urban liberation theology churches. You have black men whose objective is not to bring other black men into the church, but to actually keep the 80% of the church female, worshiping him and making certain that his needs are taken care of before the needs of the people. The bottom line is, if we go back to what Christ is, that he is our kinsman redeemer, that he is our liberator, that he is our deliverer, that he is our all in all. If we go back to who Christ is, we would build up the men in our community to become leaders and make sure that they're leaders of their households so that they can remain in work, so that they can provide for their families and meet their families' needs so they don't have to find a cone to stand behind in order to get a box for Shaquita or the other 7 women that he's been with in order to have children. We have got to change the mindset of what Christ is in America in order to save America. Christ doesn't need to be saved. America does.
Can I interject one thing right now, and then I'd like you guys to respond? First, let me say, number one, again, thanks to everybody for being here. This is taking shape and exploding in a way that I really had hoped it would. People are speaking from the heart with their own personal experiences. Let me throw this out to you now. I suggest, and I'm moving towards this direction, we know, and Baltimore is a perfect example therein, that money doesn't solve this. We've seen nothing but billions thrown after various issues all across the fruited plain. That's why I wanted everybody here tonight, because I'm suggesting that one of the only ways that we're going to get out of our current situation in the United States of America is religion. And that doesn't cost trillions of dollars. Bringing people back to the basic core tenets that got us to where we are today. You are all godly people. You've all been speaking. Let me again, thanks, specifically by name, Shannon Wright. Thank you for being here tonight. Ken McCLENTON, thank you for being here tonight. Randy Purham, thank you for being here tonight. Ralph Chittams, thank you for being here tonight. But it's your saying these things that lends to me credence where I'm suggesting, just at the point when people want to completely eliminate religion, it's religion that may be the only way left.
It is the only way left. And Randy pointed to the scripture earlier this evening. You know, if my people who are called by my name, and then we can finish up that verse, you know, humble themselves and pray, cease from their wicked ways, you know, then he will hear from heaven and heal the land. It is the church that needs to reform itself first. A spiritual revival must occur inside the church first before it can sweep the land and heal the nation.
Amen.
And we talk about people who are leaders, people who are managers in law enforcement. We break them down into managers and leaders. Managers manage things. Leaders inspire people. And I suspect that, I know it's no different in religion at all. I have a couple more articles that I want to go into, which illustrates what I was saying from the very beginning of the show. Here's an article from Newsweek. Christian persecution and genocide is worse now than at any other time in history. The persecution and genocide of Christians across the world is worse today than at any time in history, and Western governments are failing to stop it, a report from a Catholic organization said. The study by Aid to the Church in Need said the treatment of Christians has worsened substantially in the past 2 years compared with the 2 years prior, and has grown more violent than at any other period in modern times. Not only are Christians more persecuted than any other faith group, but ever-increasing numbers are experiencing the very worst forms of persecution. The report examined the plight of Christians in China, in Egypt, in Eritrea, in India, Iran, Iraq, Nigeria, North Korea, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Sudan, Syria, and Turkey over the period lasting from 2015 to 2017. The research showed that in that time, Christians suffered crimes against humanity and some were hanged or crucified. The report found that Saudi Arabia was the only country where the situation for Christians did not get worse, and that was only because the situation couldn't get any worse than it already was. The report also documented numerous cases in which Christians in countries such as India and Nigeria were murdered or beaten for practicing their faith. In Africa, the report focused on countries like Sudan, where the government ordered that churches be destroyed, and Nigeria, where ISIS-affiliated groups like Boko Haram have led a surge in attacks on Christians. In Eritrea, hundreds of Christians have been rounded up and imprisoned over the past year because of their faith. And again, that's what we're finding. We can't have that here. And I want to point out another... when I came across this article, I suspected, but this basically confirms, Jewish hate crimes are also up across the world and in the United States. This is from an organization called AEI. Based on 2019 FBI data, Jews were 2.6 times more likely than blacks and 2.2 times more likely than Muslims to be victims of hate crimes. Members of which these groups were most likely to be a victim of hate crimes. Which one? Muslims, black, or Jews? Based on media coverage, you'd probably say Muslims or blacks. According to a Google News search, I find this so boiling with irony. According to a Google News search for the term hate crimes, along with the name of each of these three groups, there are 291,000 results for hate crimes and black, 89,600 results for hate crimes and Muslim, and 67,000 results for hate crimes and Jew. Let me stop there just for a moment. If you are searching for unbiased statistical accuracy involving any societal or cultural issue, stay the hell away from Google. They mislead. They shove you to false articles. They fail to send you anything at all, or they cover up, or they send you only to information that outright lies. Because you will not customarily find this information unless you know where to go for it. Because that's information Google and other organizations don't want you to know. Christianity, Jews, all across the nation, and that's why we're here tonight, to discuss what is the state of religion today in the U.S. and why does it matter. Let me ask all of you, what will get us out of this? Will it be money that will help us, or will it be the backs of the individuals involved in religion at all? Anyone?
Money by a
Shannon,
Ladies first.
Shannon, go ahead.
All right. Money by itself won't fix it. Money in the hands of leaders that are grounded in their faith and are steeped in the belief that through proper, that if you buy enough fishing poles, that is your way out. But see, those fishing poles have parts and pieces, and some of those pieces are families. And the family piece is the mother and the father and the children. And some of those pieces that go together to make that fishing rod are communities and neighborhoods and schools and churches and all those pieces. And if you get all the right pieces and build that fishing pole and start teaching men to fish, then yes, money can help to buy the parts and pieces needed to be able to teach what needs to be taught to help people to elevate themselves. If not, you might as well open a toilet and just put it in there and flush it down.
So if I'm reading you correctly, basically government isn't going to have a hand in this. Not a hand at all. Because historically,
no,
it hasn't worked.
I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
If the electorate, the body itself, the folks in this country, and then see, you are crazy like a fox. Because if we go back to the first question of good or evil, the existence of and are we, if we have people that recognize that we are inherently bad and choose to be good, and if those same said people choose to be leaders in the Christ-like model, and like Randy on this call, run for Congress in enough numbers, then yes, government can have a hand in being a part of the solution. But if not, then not.
Okay. Randy, Ken, Ralph.
I would say, I agree with Shannon. And I would caveat with, it takes a paradigm shift in not only mentality, but our culture as not only communities, but as a nation, to understand where we're going, this rabbit hole that we're going down right now. In order for us to sit back and say, okay, we're allowing this to happen, but why? And it goes back to what Edmund Burke said. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil for good men to do nothing.
Yep.
And that's what we're seeing right now. We're so persistently trying to rely on government to step in and do something. And we all know what Ronald Reagan said about government helping the people. That doesn't work either. This falls back on solely we, the people, by the people, for the people. And in order for us to understand that, maybe there needs to be a cataclysmic holocaust that happens in America for Americans to wake up and say, whoa, what is going on here? And I think we're already at that cusp right now. I think we're at that point. And so I'll be very surprised to see what 2022 brings, because we have to let this play out for the rest of the year. We only got 5 months left in 21, so we have to let this play out. But I think 22 is going to be a revolutionary awakening. And that's what we actually need. We need not only a spiritual awakening, but we need a political awakening in America in order to get back on the right track and say, okay, enough is enough of this. We tried your experiment. Now we're going to get back to the original American experiment.
Ralph or Ken?
Well, I will say... No, go ahead, Ralph.
No, go ahead, Ken.
No, I would say this, and Randy's absolutely right, but every great political revival has been founded on the backs of a spiritual one. In fact, the last one that we had was the spiritual revival under Ronald Reagan from 1976, when he gave his speech at the Republican Convention up until about 1988. You had the radical Christian evangelicals that became pronounced and there was a revival throughout America in the faith in Jesus Christ. And I'm going to tell you right now, the state churches are just as corrupt as the state institutions of governance. There is such a need for repentance and revival in this country, an awakening that we haven't seen since about the 1800s, the late 1800s in this nation. It is time for a spiritual awakening, one that doesn't require you to take a yoga mat or learn how to ring bells, one that professes the goodness of Jesus Christ to the world, and for him we live and for him we die. It also will require, on the back of that spiritual revival, a strict constructionist view of conservatism. And that conservatism will take us back to the formidable part of our Constitution, which makes us a nation built on 5 basic principles: Christianity, conservatism, capitalism, constitutionalism, and individual sovereignty. We must have a spiritual revival. It cannot be done in the modern state churches. It's going to be dependent on the itinerant.
I seem to have lost Ken. Ken, let me see if I can give you a blast back. Oh, damn it, Jim. Okay, well, let me go to this while I try to see if I can get some other folks back. So I wanted to ask everybody tonight, what is the state of religion today in the United States, and what does it matter? And I found 2 excellent articles that are basically saying to Christians, wake up. Here's an article that I found from, it says, the headline is Conservative Scholar, America must have religious awakening. It must have a religious awakening if it is to survive. Conservative scholar Charles Murray is not optimistic about the future of the United States. In an interview with Canadian pro-life activist Jonathan Von Meren, Murray, famous for his many books on culture and politics, said the American experiment in constitutional government is dead as a doornail, and that without a religious awakening, the United States may last only a few more decades. We as Christians, we are being sent messages, and I think they are in the clear, and they are very loud. And the question is, I am asking everybody tonight, are we listening?
Not many people are listening, but also, and this is something that honestly should be encouraging to all Jews and to all Christians. That which is powerless and impotent is never attacked. It is ignored because it is not a threat. The fact that Judaism and Christianity are facing more opposition now than at any point in history is proof in and of itself that our God is real. And we should be emboldened by the fact that the enemy knows that our God is real, and that should give us even more strength to stand up and fight and not roll over and play dead.
I submit that's every bit correct. Every bit correct. I want to read this paragraph in this article and then ask everybody here. And by the way, Ken, if you're listening, please call back. Ken McCLENTON, please call back. I've got everybody here back except you. This paragraph, Murray explains that the loss of character in religion is like the old cartoon where the coyote is chasing the roadrunner and runs off the edge of the cliff and continues running without a problem for a while and then suddenly realizes where he is. Then he goes crashing to the ground. We have run off the edge of the cliff and we are still running great. And it's not going to last very long.
But like what I was saying before, everything that's happening, all the opposition that we're facing, should be the evidence that we need that the God that we serve is real. You don't see them going after Taoists. You don't see them going after Scientologists. You don't see them going after whatever. Why? Because they know that their little g God is not real. They're coming after us because the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is the everlasting and the true God. And they are fearful of him. That's why they must attack us.
Ken, I think you're back. Are you there, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'm back. Thank you.
All right. This is another paragraph in the article. When pressed for advice on what ordinary Americans should be doing in these times, Murray answered that they should move to small towns and live the traditional American way of life and get involved in their communities. That's not entirely possible. Certainly not for a large portion of America. Ultimately, he says he believes what America needs is the emergence, and I'm really curious what everybody is going to think of this, and does it exist? Ultimately, he believes that what America needs is the emergence of a charismatic person who is devoted to the original American founding, who is going to attract political support in the way that Ronald Reagan did. That person will hopefully be able to restore some of the character and institutions of the United States. So, question to everybody here. Is that what we need? And then, on top of that, does such a person exist? If so, who is it? Shannon, I haven't heard from you in a while.
So, we definitely need leaders that are willing to step up and lead and kind of organically congeal into a group that is capable of a coalition, better word, to be able to move communities, neighborhoods, cities, states forward in the manner in which our principles were drawn hundreds of years ago. It's going to take that looking back to be able to go forward. So do I think we need that? I think we need some sort of a coalition that forms to be able to lead based on the biblical principles. Absolutely. Do I think that person exists? And I think if we need it, God's already thought about it, and it's already in place. But sometimes he only gives us a few steps ahead. So I think it's important for all of us to stay active in our prayer lives, to be able to ask for the sight to be able to see the path that's set for us individually. I think everybody has a role to play in moving us in the correct direction if they allow God to be God and are willing to sit back in the passenger seat and let God drive the car.
Randy, Ralph, or Ken?
Well, I don't think we need a national charismatic leader to pop up. You know, as believers, we have a leader already, and his name is Jesus the Christ. But for this political discussion, I think the mistake that we have made in this country for too long is we have looked towards an all-powerful federal government to step in and be the answer to all of our problems, when that's never the intention from the founding of this nation. I think what we need to do is we need to find local politicians. I'm talking about the sheriff, the dog catchers, the council members, the aldermen, the whomevers, the people who in those down ballot positions who make decisions that affect our lives more intimately than any president or member of Congress. We need to start running principled Christian conservatives in these down ballot races so that we can take over the school boards, so we can kick out critical race theory. where we can elect members to our city councils, which will roll back all this LGBT, whatever, QP plus legislation, this transgender foolishness with men free swinging in the ladies' locker rooms. We need to run, like the Christian principled conservatives in these down ballot races where we can start changing things immediately and not always look to an all-powerful sovereign federal government.
Randy or Ken?
I would say that we already had that person up here before us, and that was President Donald Trump. He was so antithetical to what we have become accustomed to in our lifetime, and he changed the dynamic of politics as we know it today, both on the national stage and on the international stage. We have to look back and think about the establishment across the world could not stand this man because he went against the grain of what was considered to be the norm. And he woke up so many American people and international people. You wouldn't believe it. Over in Italy, Germany, Norway, Lithuania, London, different places I traveled to, there was Trump flags flying in those places. People were wearing Make America Great Again hats in those places. I posted pictures of this stuff. This guy came along and changed the dynamics of what leadership looks like and what politics should look like. And we kind of like castigate him as okay, you know, he's just a showman, he's a con, and this and the other. That's the general consensus of Trump. But all in all, he changed the paradigm and the mentality for not only the American people, but a lot of people that carry conservative views. And he also shifted a lot of the minorities' mindset. And so it took a concerted effort from the left to get this guy out of office and to get him out of the limelight. And they took away his social media and everything. They did everything they could to silence this guy as if he was God himself. And we see now that they shifted from Trump to now they're focusing on religion. So we have to wake up and pay attention to these things. To smell the roses, smell the coffee, whatever it is that you want to smell, you better start smelling it because it has happened already. And it's happening right now. They think that Trump is out of the picture. He's back on the scene again doing his rallies and all that good stuff. And he's trying to revigorate people because people are starting to lose hope. And they're letting these things slide that's going on in society. And he's like, hey, you might want to pay attention because the left is still at it with CRT, with the transgender movement targeting children. These are things that are going on right now, and we're sitting around trying to figure out what's going on when the answers are right here in front of us. We need to get motivated, activated, and engaged and push back on these things. So the one biggest problem that I have with conservatives is we have an abundance failure, and I've been a conservative for 25 years. We have a problem with uniting and coming together and fighting against things. For some reason or another, the Democrats and the left, they are united and they are coordinated to the T. But when it comes to conservatives, and this goes all the way back to the Reconstruction era and slavery and all that good stuff, we were not organized back then. And that's how they were able to win back to South.
Ken McCLENTON.
We have to stop.
I'm sorry, Randy, go ahead.
I was saying we just have to stop and pay attention to what's going on. That's all I got.
Ken McCLENTON.
I'm going to tell you that for those who say it is impossible to go to the small towns and make the transitions that are necessary for a revival in America, don't understand the ways of God. I am telling you right now
the revival and the reawakening of America will not happen in New York. It will not happen in Baltimore. It will not happen in D.C., but it will happen in small towns throughout America. It will happen with the revival of the hearts of people turning back to God. And what better place to do it than in small and midtown America? And taking the opportunity to gain vocational skills, learn a trade, and go someplace and make money where you have a lower cost of living. When you look at what the left does, the left never questions why they must do what they do. They do what they do. They will move to a small town. They will move to Idaho if they have to. They'll move to North Dakota if they have to. Why? To infiltrate school boards and to infiltrate city councils and to infiltrate businesses and to make you make cultural decisions based out of fear and feelings rather than faith. So I'm going to say this to those who are sitting at home right now in urban America thinking that the only place that you're going to make it is in the big city. Go back home. Revitalize your city, your town, your locale. Make it stronger than it ever was, filled with the faith of God. And watch what happens when it comes to congressional races and school board races and other things of that particular nature. You'll be able to send the victory to Washington that we've all been waiting for.
I'd like to make two more statements. I know it's getting late, and I thank everybody for staying here. You may or may not know that it's been 2.5 hours since we've started this. And I don't hear any snoring, so apparently lots of people are still engaged, and certainly the people in the chat room are, as am I. The Honorable Robert Marshall, he's a former member of the Virginia House of Delegates, said back in September of 19, he said, if Christians don't personally engage in politics, it's all over for America. That's kind of a negative stance. But what I've been trying to do with the show, and I think a lot of you here, each and every one of you in your own way, are making a positive statement, and that's this. I don't believe it's all negative. I believe that 2022 could be a real eye-opener for a lot of people. And that's not some pie-in-the-sky kind of way off in the future. That's next year. That's next year. So I think, and then I would like everybody to weigh in if you could, please. I think what has been handed to many people who are religious is a potential golden opportunity to become even more involved in, as was said here, local communities, local politics, to do things on a local level, because that's where the first effect occurs. Not you. I submit you will not get satisfaction from the federal government. You never have, and you never will. And I think there are some massive potential positive events coming, that the blinders are slowly being removed from a lot of people in the United States. Unfortunately, it took our plight predominantly now to get us there, and we have the potential to step off the precipice if we're not careful. But I think this presents a golden opportunity. Let me put it this way. I talked to the guy who was the president of the Alinsky Center. I can't think of the guy's name. Ralph Benko, that's the guy. I had him on about 2 years ago. And one of the things that shocked me was Ralph said, I don't understand about the rules for radicals. It's been taken up by the left, and it's been relatively effective. Why don't conservatives or Republicans do that too? Well, you don't have to go with the rules for radicals, but I submit that you do have to be smarter than the average bear, and I think that opportunity is right in front of us. So, all four of the folks here tonight, Shannon Wright, Randy Purham, Ralph Chittams, Ken McCLENTON, I would like you all to weigh in. What do you see for the future? I said, what is the state of religion today in the United States, and why does it matter? What do you see? What do each of you forecast, perchance, that's coming? Is this the opportunity that I have mentioned?
as I've said throughout this, where there is a big negative is an opportunity for an even greater positive. And I think this is that opportunity, that time to hit the reset, go back to traditional values, go back to core principles, and actually make it do what it do. Again, teachers teach, preachers preach, leaders lead. We, for the most part, know what it is, how it's supposed to look when we are being successful as parents, when we're being successful in our neighborhoods and in our communities. We understand what that looks like. So what we need is for those that don't care what that looks like to move out of the way, and those that are mission mandated, and there is only one group of folks on this planet that are mission mandated to actually put that well-being and good of man above all others, and that's those that profess faith. So if we get in our lane and do what we're supposed to do, I think the future is much brighter than the past.
Absolutely. Randy Purham?
I agree, and to your earlier point, if it does have to start at the local level. One thing people tend to forget is that our sovereignty starts with us, the people, and we, the people, give government that power to govern. So if we try to do this in an averted way, government is going to think, people in the government is going to think that they have like the ultimate, sovereign power over America, over the people. So we have to take back first our local governments, our school boards, like you said, our cities, the small towns, and everything. We have to take those back first. Start at home first, actually, because if you're yielding liberal kids that's going to run out their front door and espouse the craziness that's going on right now, then you have failed. So we have to start in the home, start in our neighborhoods, start in the community at large, go to start the cities, townships, boroughs, what have you, and then take the state. One thing we have to remember about the Constitution, the 10th Amendment is ours. Anything that's not enumerated for the Congress, for the federal government, is the power of the states. And a lot of people don't understand that, and they forget that. This is why some of the states are fighting back against the government, suing the Biden administration for the encroachment of the powers that is yielded to the states and not to the government. And that's where we need to start with. Otherwise, this will be a failed American project. We have to get back into the books. We have to get back into understanding what our role is in society. We have failed as American people to be civically minded about what it is that we're doing. And I would quote from Thomas Jefferson that if we are to guard against the ignorance and remain free, it is the responsibility of every American to be informed. And we don't see that right now.
Ken McCLENTON.
I'm going to tell you that we're about to enter one of the biggest financial crises America has faced in almost 30 years, not since the period after Jimmy Carter going into 1984 with Ronald Reagan, in which the prosperity of America was questioned. There will be 9 to 10 million homes next year that will be going up for either foreclosure or eviction notice. The number of individuals who will be able to find good-paying jobs when the federal government increases the tax rate will be very difficult. And so with those particular oncoming burdens, and you have inflation, which is escalating at a very precipitous rate every single day. Now, it may not be something that CNBC is reporting because the type of inflation they're looking at doesn't show up on paper until maybe a year or two later. But when you remember how much you make, and then you end up going to the store to buy some hamburger meat because you can't afford steak anymore, and bologna is twice expensive than it was just last year, you know that we are facing a dearth financially as a nation. We also have the largest student loan debt we've ever had in American history. And I think all those students should sue their colleges because now they can't seem to find jobs in which can pay off their student loans. So we have a financial crisis ahead of us. It's going to take tough men and women making tough decisions, making budget cuts in the federal government, making budget cuts at the local and state level, and finally explaining to the American people that government is here to protect your rights and to guarantee your rights. It is not here to guarantee your outcomes financially. And so we have a watershed moment in this country that's going to require the church to go through an awakening and be ready financially, and as well the government to have leaders who understand fiscal conservatism, and as well the fact that they do not have all power and that they are corrupted and need to be reviewed and audited.
Ralph Chittams.
Just to go back to the point that you were making about the 22 midterm elections, I believe that we are going to see the Democrats booted out of control of both houses of Congress.
I agree.
The Republicans are going to retake control of the House and are going to establish clear dominance in the Senate, simply because of a number of things that are going on. One, that Ken just mentioned, which is the economy of the United States right now going completely into the tank. We have inflation rates now that we have not seen since the Obama administration. A trip to the grocery store now can, give you a nosebleed or a heart attack. We have gone from energy independence to energy dependence in a matter of 6 months. Gas prices in certain places, i.e. California, depending on where you are in the state, have already hit $6.
I've seen that.
Right. So with all of these things happening nationwide, if Republicans don't retake the House and the Senate, it's because they committed suicide. Because the table has been set for Republicans to run the table. All they have to do is not screw it up.
Absolutely. So I want to leave here tonight with the fact that, and people here, please correct me if I'm wrong, we have decided that there is such a thing as good versus evil. We have decided that some people may be born good, that some folks need to be educated in terms of religion. We have decided essentially that we need a good foundation, that religion is here to stay. Religion has a golden opportunity, and that we cannot, if we wish to survive, separate politics from religion. It can't be done if we're to survive as a nation. And I think we may have determined also that the people who may truly have the greatest amount of power in their hands, potential kinetic power, are those of faith. Have I made any misstatements so far?
Nope.
Sounds good. On target.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think this is absolutely unprecedented. Let me make this final offering. By the way, folks, if you're curious, if you can hear this in the background, I'm in a lovely area that is not downtown Sacramento, but is South Sacramento, and those are gunshots that are happening just outside back here, where my wife lives and where the studio is located. So if you want to know where your ammunition expenditures are occurring, well, it's South Sacramento. Keeping ammunition manufacturers, certainly keeping those factory lines moving for more ammunition. Probably 9mm would be my guess. It doesn't sound like shotgun shells to me. Having said that, I'd like everybody here, if you have some kind of a summary that you'd care to make about what we've talked about tonight, and or if, let me just be plain. Shannon Wright, do you think that you're going to come back in another bid for mayor of Baltimore?
It's funny you should ask that. My husband just walked in from being out back for a minute.
Okay.
So we had this conversation, and the day after Election Day, we both said, absolutely not, the door is closed. We nailed it shut.
Okay.
They're blocked over. And then slowly we saw the city continuing to speed up in the wrong direction and said, well, maybe we should take some of the cinder blocks off the door and the planks off the door. So I will say this. We are continuing to do the work. We're doing the work that we talked about during the election cycle to try and turn the city around. And I will say this. For those that supported my campaign in 2020, if there is a desire for folks to see me run again, I would ask that they go to writefrommaryland.com, sign up for newsletters and updates, because we have kept that website up and are updating it regularly.
Okay.
And if they are interested, go to Urban Red or Write for Baltimore, make a $20 donation. If I get 1,000 people throughout the country that are willing to show their support by sending $20, then yes, I would strongly consider and start to formulate a run for mayor again.
I put my money where my mouth is, and I put my money behind you, and I will do it again. Shannon Wright.
Thank you, sir.
Because I believe in what it is after listening. What you've said tonight can be nothing more than essentially a political ad for this is your platform right here.
Yeah.
Then I also have to ask this, since Mike may also be in the room. You guys going to do a show?
I
have to ask, because it was so good.
He said to me, he he may wait till the end of the show. And I just walked into the room where he is, and he's smiling. He said, he's going to wait till the end of the show, but he's going to ask. So, drum roll, please. We have discussed, we have talked about it, and yes, we would be humbled and honored to come back to active media duty with you alongside you. Yes, we would love to.
It may be self-serving, but not really, because I don't make anything. I'm the only dude that's keeping SHR afloat right now, and I'm not making any money off of it. But it is self-serving in terms of, I love your show, and I'd love to hear you guys every day. It's as simple as that.
Well, how could we say no to that?
So if it's self-serving, okay, so be it.
Well, we'll talk off the air, and we'll work out the details.
Let's do it. Randy Purham, any kind of a summary that you might have. And also candidate for Congress in Alaska. That Randy Purham.
I would say I would just encourage all the listeners, all the American people, to get your head at the forefront of contact and get to work. We're in a dire situation right now as a country with the hostile takeover of our American way of life. Our Constitution is slowly being shredded and flushed down the toilet. And if we are okay with that, then you're in the wrong country, because there are plenty of examples of other countries that do not abide by their Constitution, if they have one, and they do not abide by the freedoms that are so-called granted by the people in which they are elected. So if you want to become what we say a training aid, then do nothing. But if you want to continue to live your life the way that you have always known it, then you need to get busy and fight back against this nonsense that's going on in our country. And go to my website, www.ourfirmforus.com, and support my candidacy. Anything helps. You can follow me on all social media platforms, just about, at rperham. That's RPURHAM. And you can tune in to our show on Mondays or Fridays on TECNTV.com. The new at 12 p.m. Central, 1 p.m. Eastern. And I truly, truly appreciate this panel discussion tonight. This was like so so refreshing.
Been great.
And I am like elated that this conversation transpired, because this is a much needed conversation that needs to happen across not only America but across the world. And I thank you, Bill, for putting this on it.
Thank you ever so kindly. Ralph Chittams.
Well, first, thank you for putting this together, and a huge thank you to all of the other participants. The closing remark that I would give is for every believer who's out here listening to the show tonight. It doesn't matter how bleak the situation looks. It doesn't matter how badly you feel about the situation. If you are a believer, there are two things that you need to understand, and you need to understand very down into the core of your soul. The first is there are more people with you than are against you. And I'm not just talking naturally, I'm talking spiritually. And the second thing to remember is that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but he's given us power, love, and a sound mind. Keep up the good fight. Jesus changed the world with 12. We don't need millions. We just like the Marine Corps. We just need a few good men and women who are willing to fight.
Ken McCLENTON.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share this platform with such tremendous hosts in their own right, men and women of God who love the Lord and who are being positioned for such a time as this. I want to thank also the viewers and the listeners who've tuned in tonight to listen to this four-way in terms of conversation on faith and politics. Information as president of TECNTV.com. Let me just give a plug there and thanksgiving to Randy and what he does on Mondays and Fridays at 1 p.m. and all the other hosts that we have. I'm going to tell you right now, many people in the conservative movement are so caught up on personalities that they're blinded by the purposes for which they are to actually operate. They're so attuned to a Glenn Beck or a Dan Bongino or a Mark Levin and things of that particular nature. And it's great to listen to individuals, but you know what? There are smaller entities that are out there at the grassroots level. And I'm going to encourage you to do something that you probably haven't done in a long while. Tell a friend, share the good news of these small providers of news services and commentary for the rest of the world to hear, because they are at the very pulse of America. I love all the other guys at the very top, and congratulations to their success. But the men and women who are holding the most important conversations are closer to you than Fox News in New York. So I encourage you to promote SHR Media, TECNTV.com, and all the other smaller entities out there that are giving you the news and information without fear or trepidation of what a commercial organization will say, think, or do, or worry about a woke activist coming on board. Here's the last thing I will tell you.
we are all sinners. We have all fallen from the grace of God. Your sins began at birth, and they continue on even now. There's some in the listening and viewing audience that have never heard a conversation about good and evil. And some of you all, by the Holy Spirit, have been diverted to now rethink your relationship with God. I thank you for listening to the Holy Spirit, and I encourage you to hear these words and then ask the Lord for salvation. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whomsoever believeth in him will not perish, but will have eternal life. If you believe that, without a shadow of doubt, without any fear, trepidation, or worry about today, tomorrow, or yesterday, and that you can confess with your mouth that Jesus Christ is Lord, accept him now, walk with him always, deny yourself while you pick up your cross and follow him. In the matchless name of Jesus Christ, I thank you for listening and watching tonight.
Folks, thank you very much. My personal thanks to Shannon Wright. My personal thanks to Randy Purham. My personal thanks to Ralph Chittams. My personal thanks to Ken McCLENTON. It will be you and people like you of faith who pull this nation back from the precipice. And I think we have made some discoveries tonight. You cannot separate politics from religion if you wish to keep this nation. And I also submit that the future is not bleak. It does not have to be bad. It does not have to be evil. We have the capability to make the necessary changes right here. We have that power. Will we exercise it? I think a great deal will be indicated next year. And I am positively influenced about this. I think we'll discover power that by faith we suspected we had, but I think we will prove that we have. And again, Shannon Wright, thank you. Ralph Chittams, thank you. Randy Purham, thank you. Ken McCLENTON, thank you for being here tonight, for staying up so terribly late. It's almost 3 hours now. Thanks to each and every one of you for being here tonight. God bless you all, and take care.
Thank you, sir. Bless you.
Thank you, and blessings to you.
God bless. Thank you.
That's it for the show. I loved the opportunity to do this. Every once in a while, I have a good idea. Technologically, I just don't know if I can pull it off. Luckily, I pulled it off tonight. What great, incredible people. Listen to them. Listen to what they said. Replay the show. Listen to their shows. Shannon Wright, Mayor of Baltimore, right there. Randy Purham, Alaska, Ralph Chittams, Ken McCLENTON, right there. God bless you all.